was locked up and taken by an unknown entity. ETH decided to do a hard fork to restore this money. And there were quite a good deal of people in the community at the time that took exception with it. I would say it's probably about 60-40 pro hard fork on. We're smaller now. But essentially what we took exception with was the fact that, well, this is supposed to just be Bitcoin with smart contracts. That's what we're doing, right? Like when you do something on the blockchain, it's permanent. And on top of that, there were quite a lot of issues with the DAO. So for example, there were about 106 addresses actually that had money taken out of them, and not all of them were owned by the DAO hacker. And a whole bunch of mess there. Really interesting history. If you want to know more about it, there's actually a chapter now in Andreas Antonopoulos' book, Mastering Ethereum, that I helped author. It's in the appendix, and it's on the history of the DAO hack and ETC and other things. So yeah, check it out. As far as, what else was I supposed to be talking about?
What's the difference?
What's the difference?
And you can talk more with your cultures. Okay, you guys kept going forever.
Yeah, so the biggest difference kind of is that right now there are a couple different differences in the EVMs, and as time goes on, we'll probably diverge a bit more. But essentially, when a contract for Ethereum can pretty much run on ETC, and a contract for ETC can pretty much run on ETH. Where we differ a lot is in the fundamentals and the content of beliefs of the system. And I believe that is as vitally important, if not more important, the actual execution properties of it. Some people disagree, but that's our position. And we kind of just want to be able to maintain a chain that's like this. Very interesting fact that Donald McIntyre has actually pointed out on Twitter, and I didn't even realize for like 2.5 years. ETC is the only provably, the only proof of work smart contract platform out there. Pretty much every other proof of work smart contract platform wants to either go proof of stake or do some other type of consensus algorithm. Sorry?
Some other type of garbage.
Yeah, some other type of governance. And, you know, proof of work is really the only one that has been proven. So, or it has the longest history of proper operation. And so that's why we want to stick to it. And we think that smart contracts benefit from it because none of these other ones have been tested to that degree. And when they were tested in 2014 and 2015 or so on other chains, it just didn't work out very well. It became these very centralized cabals. So yeah, that's the major differences between ETH and ETC. And yeah, so welcome to, what is it now? Decontrol.
Decontrol.
Yeah. Yeah, ETC wants to decontrol its blockchain. Yeah.
Yeah, does anyone have any Ethereum?
Yeah, anybody have any questions? Sure.
If the ETC inherits some of the Ethereum blockchain, or it's completely separate?
We share the Ethereum blockchain up until block 1.92 million, at which point it splits off. That's actually one of the easiest ways to tell the difference between the two blockchains.
Which means that you might potentially have Ethereum Classic as well. So
Yeah.
sort of people who are around then can also influence ETC in some way.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting dynamic.
It is, and that's actually a pretty big difference too, but it's not on a technical level. When ETC, much to your point, first stayed with its chain and Ethereum did the hard fork, we saw that there was absolutely massive dumping, not only of the DAO contract, but probably tons of other ETC that other people owned. And that created an issue for ETC, sort of, because everybody looks at market cap and that's all anybody cares about. Nobody cares about volume. ETC is number 10 volume coin on out of everything, and probably number 5 in proof of work. But essentially, that created a rather nice property of ETC where our coins aren't really locked up and held by a handful of people. they're really very broadly distributed, or at least very available for people to buy and use. So it's just really nice. It kind of sucked at the start because ETC was doing well, and then public perception of it, because price went down, changed drastically. But long term, I think that's actually a very good thing for ETC, and I'm hoping to see that play out. And yeah, any other questions?
Do you ever see a flippening of ETH?
Not a flippening.
Of ETH back? I can do it.
Anybody who cares? No, you shouldn't.
No,
care about
of ETC back above ETH.
Yeah, but no, you shouldn't care about flippening a market cap, the worst metric ever. Is that the flippening, or is there another one?
If Ethereum Classic's ever worth more, then it will be because people are actually building applications and using it.
Oh, it would have to get so much further ahead in applications before it became worth more, probably.
Yeah.
I would argue minimal attention allows us to build more infrastructure around it too.
It does. We're avoiding the scaling issues right now, and we actually have time to see what happens with Ethereum. And I personally, I was reading Twitter. I'm like, these people are like just digging into ETH, and this is unfair. I'm going to download my own node. I'm not going to archive sync it, because archive sync is a whole other thing, and you don't need to fully validate your node. And then I did it, and like by day 5, I still wasn't synced, and I was like, oh no, we need less than 8 million gas. So yeah, it gives you really good places to kind of see where the weaknesses are, and 8 million gas is way too high. You have a lower small gasser, small blocks. That's the way it should be.
You guys have a lower gas per block limit?
No, we're still at like 8 million right now, because when ETH did it, so like the miners were like, well, we're going to do it for ETC too, and you know, mine on 8 million gas, which obviously is not very scalable. So yeah, hopefully we can lower it.
So gas changes are okay in terms of immutability?
Yeah.
Like gas limit?
We have to hard fork to change it?
No, it's a soft fork, because you could. I mean, currently you don't have to mine a full block of gas.
Oh, okay.
Because you can. 8 million is the max capacity to put in a block. And to raise that, you would need a hard fork. To lower it, you don't.
Because you could just if enough miners rejected the bigger blocks, then they would have to just stop mining them too, and just go with the crowd.
Yeah.
So you can lower it a lot easier than you can raise it if you have majority.
Yeah, exactly. And to your point, Boris, it wouldn't sacrifice immutability, because immutability, when we talk about it, isn't the particular. It's not all the operational properties of the chain. It's the state of the chain. So we don't want to mutate it in a way that either affects a prior state or would affect a future state on a smart contract that relied on some sort of property, like removing an opcode or something, or changing them in some way.
With the commitment to proof of work, what's the general community opinion on the ASICs that are going around for eThash?
I'm not going to say it's all one way or the other. I'll just give my personal opinion instead. I think ASICs are completely unavoidable, and there's a really good argument for having ASICs. I think ASICs get some growing pains at the start, because you get like one company that makes all of them. But I think when you look at it a decade down the line, that ASICs will reach a point where there's many companies producing them, and they've kind of run up against the ability to make go any smaller nanometers, and yeah, at that point they should be just fine. So I think there's some growing pains with ASICs, but I don't think perpetually forking or breaking them is very effective long term. And it kind of also it exercises some more developer control over the network. So if you make a mining algorithm and somebody wants to use it in a different way, they should be able to, essentially.
Okay.
So there's been talk on and off about the rebrand. What are your thoughts on that? Yeah.
The rebrand would have to be a soft fork.
Right.
So my personal opinion was actually, for a very long time, rebrand ETC. Luckily, I don't, quite by design, I don't have control over all the different elements of ETC. And about a good 80 or 90% of the community is completely against ever renaming it. So I would say that it's probably never going to be renamed. the one thing that we've been talking about a little, and Yaz wrote an article about it, was kind of renaming what we call the base currency, because currently a lot of people call it Ether. So maybe just try and encourage people to call it ETC, or as I've proposed many times, call it a Yaz. That sounds like a unit of accounts. Yeah. And the more Yaz says do not call it Yaz, the more it's going to be a Yaz.
Yes.
Exactly. You get a lot of stuff out of it.
Only it helps us from the software to start changing names.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the Ethereum or stuff made for Ethereum works with Ethereum Classic because we don't start flip-flopping names like that. You know, we start swapping names, and then all of the libraries that people are using, they're calling it way or whatever, they stop working.
No, it's not hard-coded with strings underneath. It uses chain IDs and stuff like that. So it's not the name that makes it compatible at all.
But for API calls, like the standard of having Ether as the name, like that's what keeps it a little bit more similar, right? Like,
if I were designing a system, so for instance, there's many chains that use EVM, and I think EVM is one layer of compatibility. And part of that, if we actually want it to work together on an EVM across chains, part of that is working on network IDs and chain IDs and making those things not tied to strings. So there's some legacy stuff that's in there today, but I would encourage everyone moving forward to think more about, I mean, you got to use integers. You don't use human readable names.
I'm talking more about like the number of people using, say, Web3, their implementation of like converting from Way to Ether, or like, going from big num to how many Way is this or whatever. Those sort of things. Like all of that stuff should theoretically still work on ETC. We start messing with the names, and then it just gets more confusing now. It's like, oh, if you start calling a Way a Yaz, then that's like just more context you're gonna have to remember, or like somebody's gonna have to flip that library you wrote because buddy guy wrote Way, and that totally now makes it not work.
We got to grow up and get better at writing code that's more portable. And I think that there's already lots of things that are not called Ethereum that run, as an example, the EVM or various other things about it. And if we actually want to live in a multi-chain future, then get ready for everything to break. But we can fix it, and we work together on it. It's all open source.
So it's like you got to pick your battles there. Like, what things are you going to break?
But it's not breaking.
It seems like just breaking it for the sake of breaking it. Like, let's just call this thing that's effectively the same something different just because we're agreeing that we forked at this certain point.
I would really love Ethereum Classic to have a vision that is uniquely different than Ethereum, and it does a disservice to call it Classic.
I'm really surprised to hear that there are people calling the unit in ETC Ether, though, because I have not ever heard anyone around here, like we call the unit itself ETC as well, and always have. So that does sound really confusing if people choose to do that. They're socially doing a disservice.
Well, while we're talking about names, we've previously, I mentioned during the intro that we had a little trademark problem with our name. Is the word Ether and Ethereum like trademark?
Ether is not. Ether to chemical.
Which one?
Ether to chemical, so you can't put.
Okay, Ethereum is trademark. Ethereum is trademark, and you're still Ethereum Classic. Has there ever been any concern that they would use that against you guys?
They've said that they're not going to, and I'm not an expert in trademark law, but you have to enforce it to actually have it be effective.
That's kind of what was told to us as it was enforced against us on our incident.
Yeah, I know. But,
specifically, word for word.
That is a different person. It's a completely different type of person.
Yeah.
That's you.
Well, yeah, you know about it. We had it done to us, so clearly different.
I want to do the thing that if Boris was running this event, he'd yell at me for, which is make a comment and pretend I'm like doing a question. Like when we first engaged with Anthony and with ETC, when we were running DogeCon here, I had an awakening as a formerly Bitcoin maximalist to the fact that I was an ETC person. because I held DAO tokens back in the day, and I didn't talk about them here because this was a Bitcoin maximalist space and I would have been made fun of. And I didn't want to fork. I thought that I share the same values as ETC people. And I was just like, oh, I guess as always in human culture, my opinion just doesn't matter. And I didn't actually find out about ETC. I don't keep up with like politics and stuff, all the stuff. Like I was mostly in Bitcoin here. So I didn't find out till like months later that like a bunch of people decided, no, we're actually keeping this blockchain. Fuck you. Immutability is important. And it's something that as we've moved here away from a Bitcoin maximalist space, I really do feel that ETC has one of the strongest affiliations on what even is a blockchain / cryptocurrency. What's the point? Like I do feel that immutability is, and I mean, our panel will be on this, but it's like, I've called out ecosystem people for putting it into scare quotes in arguments on crypto Twitter, and it's like, okay, why don't you put truth, reason, value into scare quotes? Because like there is a property called immutability, and some of us prioritize it as the most awesome breakthrough of blockchain. So like mad respect from this, like, even the Bitcoin maximalists, I'll respect you on their behalf.
Thank you. Yeah, it's funny. That's something that I've always argued too. Is so back to market cap. If you look at CoinMarketCap now, you'll notice that Bitcoin, the core fundamental blockchain, is at the top, but right below it is XRP, and then there's a ton of other examples of things that violate the fundamentals of Bitcoin below it. I love Bitcoin. I want Bitcoin to be in that #1 spot and absolutely everywhere for eternity, because it is the largest, most secure blockchain available with a highly conservative approach that I think is very, very good. But people are going to want other flavors of ice cream. And when they do, they can go to the store and they can either buy this flavor that is made of milk, or they could buy a flavor that's not. And they could get something that, because they wanted different things, still sticks to all these fundamentals. Or they could want different things, and because they want different things, they've all of a sudden adopted these completely, a complete lack of fundamentals. You know, the EOSs of the world, they'll go to because, hey, well, it's free transactions and does everything Ethereum can do.
It must be the same.
It must be better. You know, oh, it's POS, so it probably pushes them through faster and stuff. And they completely miss the boat on what makes blockchain and what makes blockchain important. And those things, like we've had that tech to do that type of financial transactions forever. So like, I really, really hope that I can convince some more Bitcoin maximalists to accept that there are other blockchains out there that have these fundamentals and want to stick to them. And that Bitcoin will do a lot better if it's surrounded by sort of other nations of the same types of beliefs or values than ones where it's completely surrounded by other ones that can just, you know, poke holes in it.
Unicorns and stuff.
I'm trying to be diplomatic here.
Well, that was for him. That was for him.
And you know what?
That was for Boris.
Honestly, like Ethereum, as far as it goes, is not the worst offender of the bunch. There's a lot of other things there that are far, far worse for Bitcoin and for the whole blockchain fundamentals in general. And so when the masses come to this space, the next time they hear about Bitcoin's price rising, they're going to buy XRP and they're not going to care at all. Like when I bought Dogecoin in 2014, I knew nothing about blockchain and I didn't care at all. I just wanted to buy Dogecoin and then sell it to somebody else a month later. And I lost money on that, and it was a great lesson.
Yeah, I had the problem that when I work, in my old job, I would tell people to buy Bitcoin for years. Just like everyone just get one. Just get one and then just have it, and then you'll have a Bitcoin. And you know, when the bull run happened, the people were coming up to me and they're like, "Yo, Ripple, Litecoin, it's this, that. Like, I believe in the team." And they'd say all the memes, memes from the internet. They would say to me in real life, and I was like,
"You this chart, man? Look at the transactions per second."
Yeah, all the, especially that I believe in the team was like the one I was like, dude. I was like, no, that's what we say like as a joke. Like a pump joke.
Bitcoin. I found it, guys.
Yeah, I came along off the Bitcoin maximalist train and onto Ethereum because I started using it. And I used it way more. I look at my total transactions of like Ethereum versus Bitcoin in my life, like I've done way more crap on Ethereum, like constant like playing around and doing stuff. And you know, maybe 100 Bitcoin transactions, maybe, you know, because you're just moving things around here and there. But like you know, with Ethereum, it's just like, oh, what would DApp am I playing with today? Like, there's like, I get it. Like, I came off the train for like, yeah, more possibilities are required.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, also OTC, like face-to-face, peer-to-peer, has kind of died in the past couple of years for Bitcoin. Like it used to be, I've done shit tons of Bitcoin transactions from selling people their first $20 Canadian or whatever here. And that's just kind of died down. Like I've had to use exchanges recently to get my income into crypto. So it's the hodling principle that's killing Bitcoin. It's like, oh, don't, you know, like everyone makes fun of me for not being a millionaire because I spent my money as money. So it's something that it used to be a lot of transactions. And I mean, we've got Lightning working here and we do Lightning transactions and stuff, but Bitcoiners are becoming like wizened golems. Like, do not touch my coins. That's no fun.
I almost can't blame them because some of them have been around in space for so long. I can kind of see somebody getting jaded with all this stuff.
Yeah, I took a year break at one point.
Yeah.
After like 2 years of grind, you know, you just take a year off. You're just like crypto nonstop.
Yeah.
Eventually, people will try to build stuff that's just, you know, for the sake of solving people's problems and that aren't in like the way that's just owned by somebody to make money. It's like I don't know, that's how I see like all this stuff sort of starting. Like, if somebody wants a peer-to-peer cash, right? Okay, well, like somebody wants peer-to-peer state machine. Yeah, like somebody wants peer-to-peer, you know, whatever else, like scooters, you know. Yeah, it's like there's so much hype around just like, yeah, let's fucking make money. Like, you know, it'll die down and eventually people will be like, what can we actually use this stuff for? It's actually useful.
It's too bad the token printing worked for so long.
The token printing.
Yeah, it worked for a long time. Yeah.
Like sell you my dreams. Like,
like once we finish the first part of the raise, we'll write the white paper. Wait a minute.
We have some code. We went to GitHub and clicked the fork button on the ERC20.
Yeah.
Once the pre-ICOs start rolling around, that's when you know we're in trouble.
Oh, we got any more for Anthony? We're gonna bring up one more guy to talk about their new dev kit.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Anthony.
So you don't want to support that?
Yeah.
Oh man, I want to hear his pitch.
No, he's my QA.
This is my form of QA. Let's see if it makes sense. Sorry, no.
Alright, so I'm still on Loha from used to be from BTC Dev 4.0. But anyways, we had a project called Emerald. And Emerald basically, louder. Oh, louder. All right. So we had a project called Emerald, and we haven't abandoned it. Still being developed upon. But Emerald is the Emerald project is a project to provide developer tools for developers. And so then we created the Emerald SDK to help put these tools together. So when you think about the DApp developer environment, think about when you're an actual end user to use use dApps or decentralized applications. You got your blockchain. You need your wallet to sign transactions, and then you need to explore those transactions on Block Explorer. So Emerald provided each of those tools that a developer needs. So we created the Emerald wallet, and the Emerald wallet uses Emerald Vault, which Emerald Vault is like our backend CLI for account storage. And then we also created the Emerald Explorer, which is a personal block explorer that doesn't have to sync up to entire blockchain to start exploring. And then we also have we have Sputnik VM Dev. So Sputnik VM Dev, or Sputnik VM, if you're not familiar with it, it's a Ethereum VM. And Sputnik VM Dev is kind of like a development version of that. And so people can run that standalone and start testing as if they were, and it supports the same opcodes as a regular mainnet. So you have all these tools. You have an Emerald wallet. You have a personal block explorer that you boot on your own local server and all that stuff. And to make things easier, we wanted to put all these together. So we created the Emerald SDK. So the Emerald SDK comprises of Emerald.js, Emerald.js UI, and Emerald.js is just another API to communicate with the blockchain. And Emerald.js UI is just front-end components that read the blockchain, display that data. So that would be like your interface, and you put that in like a React application and whatever. We have our own libraries for like special components that you would think like block height or something like that. And then you would have your, you need to sign transactions with your dApp, especially in development environment. That's why we had the Emerald Vault wallet, which uses Emerald Vault. So when you interact with the application, Emerald Wallet would be the central mechanism to sign these transactions. And it doesn't use Web3. It uses the browser URI, correct? And one of the reasons why we did that route is because Web3 has the GPL license, and the GPL license could be, some people call it a contagious license, because if you use GPL code in your project, and your project also has GPL code, so people could technically sue you for source code if they, depending on how you're using the GPL code. And we thought that was important to have in decentralized applications, because you never know, 10 years down the line, people are going to start exploiting certain Web3 applications. But anyways, from that we have, and then you need your test net, right? So we have Sputnik VM Dev, and then so we have you have a test net there, and we use all these tools together. We have the Emerald SDK, and it's just a CLI interface to just boot all these tools in one. So you can go. We had the docs.etcdevteam.com, and that shows some documentation on installing this. So you would download it, kind of like if you were to download like Truffle Framework or something, and then you would go on your command line interface and type Truffle or whatever. But you would download the Emerald SDK, and then from there you could do Emerald Vault, and that would boot up your account storage API server. And then you would boot up the Emerald, then you do Emerald Test RPC, and that would boot up your Ethereum Classic testnet that's running in the background. And it'll create, and it prints out accounts, kind of like how, if you're familiar with test RPCs, they generally print out accounts with test ether and so on. And then you can do Emerald Wallet, just this simple command, and that'll boot up your Emerald Wallet. And then you would see your test start. And then we have an app bar in the Emerald Wallet. You can see your block height of your local testnet. And then you can boot the Emerald Explorer by just running the command Emerald Explorer. And that would open up your Emerald Explorer to explore your working testnet. So you have a wallet to sign transactions. You have a Ethereum Classic test RPC that supports all the functionalities of the mainnet. And you also have an Explorer to explore transactions. So now you could do Emerald New, which would create a new project, and it's based on the just a simple to-do list. And Zach has a great quote about that. I don't know. Do you remember your
supposed to say that?
Yeah. Come on, I'm calling on it.
Something like, it's like good to-do apps, like 30 lines of code from being anything.
Yeah.
Basically,
so
you say that like you get your CRUD operations there, and like what really else do you need to an application? Like if you built that, then you just follow the pattern, repeat the pattern of like, hey, I need to read. Like, that's how you do read. Copy it, there you go, sort of thing. So we wanted to provide that sort of like to-do app is like, if you start from there, it sort of shows you everything you need to know to like be really easy to get it all up and running so that you can be the user of the to-do app, but then also like, the place where you, like, it's very obvious where the code is to go break this or whatever and see how that works.
Yeah. And I was playing around with if you download and run the to-do list, it's really simple. It's just a task, and you sign the transaction to add another task based on your account address that's in your Emerald wallet. And think about posting, removing things. Someone could take this, tinker around, just make it blue, put a little blue bird on the top, and you're basically posting and removing tweets if you wanted to. But ether tweets.
And it has like just this really bad smart contract there, just to get you sort of
just to
like,
break.
Hey, here's a smart contract.
Yeah, because a lot of developers, like a lot of us, learn by downloading something and breaking it, taking it apart and see how things are working. And something that's important about blockchain development, or particularly Ethereum Classic development, is a lot of people's machines can't just boot up nodes that are 100 gigabytes, or Ethereum's like, I don't know how much it is now, but last I checked a while ago, it was like 660 gigabytes. It might be more.
I think we're over a terabyte now.
Yeah,
That's an archival node. It's not the same.
Yeah.
Counts.
No, you can. Archival nodes are not there unless you keep all your spent transactions on Bitcoin.
Yeah, and to reduce the barrier of entry, that's why we need these testing environments. You can't, and especially if you wanted to break your DApp on the blockchain, the blockchain's immutable. So if you screw up your application, you screwed it up indefinitely. So that's why we have this testing environment, and you don't want to make expensive mistakes. And so you basically the to do that uses Emerald.js UI to communicate and read from your test RPC, Emerald test RPC. And you would sign that transaction, and you would enter, like, I want to buy milk for my to-do list, and you would hit submit, and then it'll open the Emerald wallet, and then you'll sign that transaction, and then it shows your to-do list, and that's just a simple tap. And yeah, I was able to get a journalist that he did not know anything about Git. He didn't know that his Mac had like terminal or anything. I was able to, and I worked with him. He was able to get his DApp working in 40 minutes with explanations in between. Otherwise, if you're an experienced developer and you're good with command line, do Emerald Vault, Emerald Test RPC, Emerald New, and then you do npm install, download all your app dependencies, and then you just launch it on your local server, and you can start playing with the DApp right then and there. That can take a few minutes. You're familiar with that?
Trying to make the quick start really quick.
Yeah.
But then each piece is quite modular.
Yeah.
Similar to maybe like something like Truffle, right? But there's a lot. There's some like fundamental differences in sort of how we handle things, I guess, like specifically around like wallets and like accounts, really, and also like. I don't really think that I'm not a huge fan of, like, I like MetaMask for what they are doing. It's a great tool and everything, and especially recently, like with the recent security stuff, it's really great. But I just like, I guess, have some fundamental differences in like viewpoints on like, should you have to use a specific browser plugin that implements your wallet for you? In my opinion, no. Like, should further specs and protocols around, say, like BitPay or Bitcoin has something similar, which they have like the Bitcoin protocol URIs where you can like specify a transaction, and like I think it's even more important in Ethereum to do something like that, because especially with like the transaction data, like you want to know what you're signing and sending before you send it. So like having the wallet actually build the transaction data based on what is in the URL, like it means the app developer is like basically prompting the wallet to be like, hey, I want you to call this function and send this money here or whatever, move these tokens from there to there. And it should be up to the wallet developer, or like whatever wallet developer that person trusts, it should be up to them to implement shit that will parse that transaction URI into like a form that shows what you're about to do.
It's 831.
831. Oh, yeah. Actually, I think there's 3, but that I think that was like the second. There's an earlier one that's much more rudimentary, but is very similar. It's like Ethereum : bunch of stuff, and then the 831 improved on it by very subjectively improved on it, I would say, by saying that like it was too broad or too generalist or something. I don't know. We're trying to figure out exactly which one we want to go with. If either of them make a new one, don't really know. Trying to figure that out. But like we've currently been going with A31 with a slight modification, which is for contract constructors. It doesn't handle it particularly nicely, in my opinion. Like I want to be able to say that I'm calling a constructor and pass some arguments, and also pass, like when I pass the arguments in, I want to handle it similarly to just a regular method contract. It's just that the method name is constructor. I don't know, there's some antics around it, but bottom line is that like we'd like to create some separation that is understandable between like signing and sending transactions, and like the like after effect of interacting with the dApp, like separate that from the actual application itself. Yeah, there's a lot of challenges there, but we're figuring them out as we go. Like say like running Geth nodes is a great example. Like most of Ethereum depends on Infura. Okay, like we don't want to do that. Right now we're building a lot of tools to make it so that we're trying to make it easy for you to just run a Geth node yourself and then like be able to get as much value out of it before it's fully synced or whatever, or have say the users of your app make it so that it's somewhat nice to have a full node running. But like, yeah, they're hard problems to solve, right? And the general stance there is like, you know, just like you should pick what wallet you want, the wallet should probably also let you pick what node you're going to use as well. And we want to make a bunch of tools that's going to make it easy for people to build, you know, hopefully more wallets and stuff too, so that we're not the only ones.
If an ETC gets used enough, will it suffer the same problems as Ethereum though? Where it's like gets harder and harder for regular people to have their own nodes?
Yeah.
Is there any?
Sure. Yeah, the chain bloat problem. Like
reduce the gas limit.
Yeah, small blocks.
I was actually.
You don't need blocks higher than 300K.
Or 15-second blocks.
Yeah, reduce the gas limit, and I would advocate for like increase the gas price for like contract creation to an exorbitant amount.
Just creation,
like, yeah, just creation. Just like make it stupid expensive to like create a contract so that you emphasize people testing off of mainnet.
There's only mainnet. Yeah,
right? Yeah,
there's no
like,
testnet.
It's so much easier to test on mainnet, and so like I'm just gonna test on mainnet. And like I've done it. I guarantee if anyone's building anything, they've done it too. So, like, yeah, that's what I think.
Isn't there testnet behavioral issues though, where it's not like I've heard people say it doesn't?
I wouldn't even bother with using the testnet. Like when I say testnet, I think like local EVM running like a fake Ethereum client, basically, that just runs the thing in the EVM to give you the next state.
And it's so cheap you don't even bother.
With zero gas price, like you're running it only on your machine.
Yeah, but I mean, to do it on live, it doesn't even cost that much.
Like if you're talking about like testnet where I want you to test my thing, then it gets a bit different. You actually would want to run the network. And like these are things that we've talked about. I don't think we're close to solving.
Well, we're not at that scale probably yet.
Yeah.
You know, like we just haven't hit that scale. So we're really looking. Like, if you look at the philosophy behind, you know, it's really around accessibility and then supportability. You know, try to make it really easy for somebody to just spin up a development environment, build a dApp on top of ETC. And we know that nobody's going to use these things. Right? You see it on ETH. You know, there's millions of dApps that don't use them, but they suffer.
I use them.
Yeah, sure. but you play around with that.
Yeah.
But then, you know, like when people actually do get to the point where they can build production dApps, people are actually using their standards in place. They become very supportable. And there's a lot of consistency in the way, if you're using Emerald, the way those dApps have been built. So we're trying to implement standards, and we go at it from an opinionated place. But you know, we do make it very pluggable, so you can use different wallets, different stuff.
And that's another reason why we started the Emerald project was started, is because you have all these different tools like MetaMask or
Ganache, right?
Yeah,
it's an Explorer. It's the like test RPC. Well, I guess that's pretty much it. Well, it has like an EVM as well, right? So it's like the full. It's really a bunch of products in one, where it's like, well, we're looking at it more as like Well, our Explorer, for example, doesn't. It's not like an Explorer where you boot it and then it syncs a MySQL database to the blockchain. We actually added an RPC to Geth called Get Address Transactions, which returns you the transactions for an address, which is like 95% of why you need a database when building an Explorer to begin with. So, like when you use our Explorer, the idea is that you should have like a little network drop-down thing. Just pick which network, basically which RPC endpoint you want to point at, and you should have all the functionality of a Explorer that you would expect, minus the stuff like submit your code and get it approved by the whatever, and then it's going to show up with like the source code tab on the contract.
Like when you
know what I mean, like the not just reading off the blockchain sort of functionality.
Yeah, when you boot the, and what's cool, what's also cool about Emerald is that it doesn't just by default pack all the tools in one. It's everything's portable and all the tools are modular. And the Emerald SDK is just a standardized way that we propose to use them together. Otherwise, there's people from, we had some projects that were from Ethereum, like ETH side, and they're like, oh, okay, we have these contracts and we want to move it to Ethereum Classic. We don't have like a test RPC to test against or anything too, so we recommended, all right, get the Emerald SDK. You don't have to use the Emerald wallet. You don't have to use the Emerald Vault. You don't have to use Emerald, well, you'll probably use Emerald Explorer, but just run Emerald test RPC, and then they could just start deploying and messing with whatever contract they're trying to migrate to Ethereum Classic.
How is documentation for devs handled? Because one thing I wish we could borrow in crypto from Linux is like man pages, like that I download, like I pick what I want to import, and then I'm able to run a man page to understand rather than.
Yeah, we have a guy on our team, Isaac, who loves that sort of thing. So he's like fully ham on the notion of like tight coupling between code and documentation, and like. We've been talking about this for months, the idea of like why there are so many like human maintained wrappers for this RPC interface. It's mind-boggling. Like if you look at Open API, like Swagger, like normal API development tools, like all of this stuff for the most part is generated now as long as you follow the spec and you provide the JSON schema for what your API is. And it's just because we chose JSON RPC as the thing we're going to use, we can't use like Open API and stuff like that. So like it's sort of like a time thing. Like who has the time to write the generator for Rust that's going to take this like specification that Get spits out and generate a Rust client for it? Like none of us have time to do that, but like all of us want to do that stuff. But like, man, is it ever important? So like, if anyone has time.
Well, that links into, I was going to ask, is it all JavaScript tooling? Is there any Python implementation, like Viper in the ETC? Like, does Viper work on ETC? Viper is like Solidity, but Python
So
based.
it all compiles just to EVM bytecode. So you could theoretically use, Python, Solana. There's one key thing that throws a wrench in a lot of things, though, is that there's a couple opcodes that aren't in the ETC EVM. So like, was it Constantinople or whatever? There's I think it's like the revert opcode or something is missing. And so if you use later versions of Solidity, there's a chance that it won't work.
Anything higher than 4.19?
Yeah, that sounds really familiar. Yeah. It's around that 420.
Yeah, 420 to cut off.
Yeah, so like that's sort of one of the things that I guess like, okay, if you're using these Emerald tools and you just say like Emerald compile or Emerald deploy or whatever, like it's just going to use the EVM or the Solidity version that's correct for you, and we don't have that in place for any other things other than Solidity at the moment. Obviously something that we've been thinking about. But like Solidity has such a large market share on things, it seems that like,
I'm getting radicalized over to Viper and headed to Connecticut with Bryant, so I might volunteer that documentation.
Yeah, just speaking of documentation, I originally joined as like technical writer for ETC Dev, and I've been working on some documentation projects, and did a lot of research of existing documentation, and you show that to some Ethereum developers, and they're like, it's kind of legacied out. There's a different way of doing that, and like, and you think about ETC and ETH development, there's actually a lot of similarities because they're technologically very similar. And you know, some like the Homestead documentation has barely been touched in like 2 years, you know, and it's just left to a wiki. But ETC Dev, we were like, okay, we're gonna start, you know, tackling and trying to find more standardized ways of doing things. And it's just opinionated ways, but things that a lot of developers would just get an easier barrier to entry into developing and testing things. And I think a lot of people were kind of like neglecting documentation, because I even read in channels where people are just like, they're just too lazy to touch or anything. Because you think about it, you had this huge bull run too, so everyone's like a little bit distracted and you know, like, like we don't need documentation. Look at the price.
Look at the moon.
Yeah, we already got moon, but and people were neglecting documentation. And you think about it now, it's like, okay, we really need infrastructure. We really need to, you know, kind of like prepare for something like that. Because, like I've seen like other companies like Truffle, everyone else, that everyone's starting to really tackle their documentation in general now, because I think people are really thinking more of the infrastructure mindset, and you know, getting prepared for the next wave of huge users and everything. Because and you need good documentation too, because there's some documentation that it could just be a wiki and no one's really creating a standardized way of learning and stuff. Like I came from academia in a way, and you know, there's like generally developers, when developers often write documentation, it's generally more of like a reference, like API reference, but that's not really documentation. You need tutorials, you need know-hows, and you also need to think about barrier to entries that not everyone has to use. Developers might just go straight to the reference API and be like, oh yeah, playing around with stuff. But you know, some people, and arguably a large majority, needs actual guidance. And that's something that's getting more popular that I personally see with crypto projects in general. Is yeah, people got to learn how to use stuff. And you think about security too. Like I haven't seen too much security documentation, but I know a lot of smart contracts get hacked a little later after the launch. But, yeah, so
largely as a result of what Anthony had mentioned of just forking ERC20 like as a standard, like so many ICOs, pretty much like any attack vector there was from like, oh, let's just try, you know, everyone's been using this, let's just use it and then build upon it without understanding it at a deeper level. Yeah. So it is something that, I mean, with the discussion before from Zach around like how like onboarding, like wallets having their different privacy principles and stuff like that. One thing that I think is really important as an end user educator is I think everyone's first onboarding to crypto should be super cypherpunk principled, and it should be emphasizing holding your private key and knowing what that means. So I like the attitude I'm seeing here around that. Because I mean, one of my biggest like end user facing heroes in the space, Taylor Monahan, had like written a thing about like, wait, did we make it too easy to just create an account and not understand what that means? And like, I think we won't have reasonable, sustainable onboarding if everyone's like, oops, I lost that thing you said I should have.
And Emerald Wallet uses, it's more of like the GUI for the Emerald Vault. Mm-hmm. And Emerald Vault is like, it's an account storage API. You can sign transactions stuff using the regular CLI for it, but it also works offline too. So you kind of have like, you basically sign transactions almost offline. Like you need that security is kind of like the future. Kind of like how that like Parity came out with their Parity signer. That thing was pretty sweet. Offline offline signing and stuff, and that's like, and when you think about this, when you think about the principled approach, that makes sense because that's the whole reason why everyone's here. That's the reason why Bitcoin and blockchain became desirable in the first place. Not everyone might like that, and there are good and there are bad ideas.
So,
but and you know,
let me interrupt you. You just made me you remind me of like this really cool thing. So I went to TruffleCon and they just announced this feature that they did for Ganache CLI, which is like this fork option, where you can give a block hash and you'll basically get a test RPC that will basically act as a fork from that block. So like if you have a contract on chain and the idea is like you want to test the result of running this transaction, like function call to this contract. You can like fork from whatever block, like current block, and then run the transaction and then like inspect the state and see basically what's changed. And so like that's something that we want to bring to like our implementation of the wallet as like, you know, sort of that statement where it's like, we want to be able to tell you what's going to change inside of the smart contract after you run the transaction, because like then it'll start to make you sort of think of things in that way. Like the idea of like the trust me button and then the thing can do whatever it wants on your behalf. Like, you know, don't really like that idea. Like much prefer, yeah, the like deliberate interaction with the blockchain and then like having a very good understanding of what you're about to do to make it hard for people to scam each other, basically.
And that's the cool thing about like the philosophy of dApps too is you're also with all these internet regulations and data regulations too. Maybe you want to have a dApp and use and make it compatible with tools that make sure you know at the least as much possible about your user. Because and you know, and like when you think about like Web3, you have the Web3 injection. Basically, you can inject and spy on all the users and
figure out who has Web3 injected.
Yeah,
like,
and people
you're running MetaMask,
and I don't know. I think they are addressing that concern. I don't know if it's fixed yet. They did it already.
But again, like going back to like, okay, the defaults that you allow your developers to do, it's like one of the permissions is like access your private key. And it's like, should the developer of an application really ever access your private key? It's like when you OAuth of Google, for example, can you imagine a Google scope where it's like, and the app has access to your Google password? Like, no, that's fucking crazy, Doc. Like, that, you know what I mean? It's just, that's, you gotta like set sensible standards and like protect people from themselves. That's sort of
there's well, right now there's a lot of people like even I know a lot of people in crypto that they don't care if they use like you know, one of the exchanges one of the things that end users exchange is like privacy for better user experience. Like they use like say Coinbase, they don't have access to their private key, and the exchange can shut down anytime. But you know, and with dApps too, you know, you want to be you want your funds and access to things to be less dependent on other people as much as possible, unless you really trust them. But yeah, that's what we're going with Emerald. But any more questions?
Yeah, any more questions? Thinking maybe we take a 10-minute break. I gather whomsoever is my panelists near the end of that and run over my quick questions with y'all so you can think on it. I think we'll keep it pretty short. We'll maybe have like half-hour panel that opens into group discussion. But for now, 10 minutes, grab a smoke, grab a drink. Thank you so much.